Hello, my dear friend, curious soul and sensitive heart. Have you ever wondered if destiny, that invisible loom weaving our lives, can be so cruel as to return you to the very hell you thought you had escaped, but with an unsuspected purpose? Stay with me, because the story I have for you today is one of those that will chill your blood and then ignite your heart. An epic of fear and resilience that will remind you that sometimes true freedom is not found in distance, but in the boldest confrontation. Because, you know, she had fled her past, building a new life thousands of kilometers away with a borrowed identity. But destiny, cruel and ironic, led her directly back to the man she was escaping, revealing a truth that would shatter not only her present, but also the fragile hopes of her future. Allow me to introduce Camilla Valeriano, or rather, the woman who once was Camilla Valeriano. Now, in the bustling anonymity of the big city, she called herself Lena Soto, a simple, almost transparent name that she hoped would keep her invisible. At 29 years old, Lena's life was a mosaic of fears and precariousness. Each day a thin tightrope between the longed-for present and the past that haunted her. Her eyes, once a lively hazel, were now a shadow of themselves, deep and tired, with a constant vigil etched into her pupils, as if expecting an attack at any moment. Her dark brown hair, which was once a wild whirlwind, she now wore pulled back in a tight braid, trying to go unnoticed to camouflage herself. Her skin, once smooth, began to show the ravages of insomnia and constant worry, with fine lines around her eyes that betrayed her perpetual anguish. Her appearance was a reflection of her existence. Simple clothes, chosen from second-hand shops, neutral colors that blended with the background. A worn gray woolen coat with loose buttons was her winter uniform, and a pair of sports shoes, their soles already worn out, carried her from one place to another in her multiple subsistence jobs. Her hands, small but strong, were calloused from work, not the delicate typing of an office, but the roughness of cleaning floors and handling boxes in night warehouses. Her nails, almost always broken and unpolished, were a testament to her daily struggle for survival. She lived in a small apartment on the top floor of a dilapidated building, in a forgotten neighborhood of the city, where the smell of frying and dampness filtered through the walls. The space was so tiny that it barely fit her only valuable possession, a wooden easel and a few tubes of paint. Every corner, every shadow of her home was a reminder of her fugitive status, a precarious sanctuary that she hoped would not be discovered. Injustice was not an abstract concept for Lena. It was the very breath of her life. Every time she crossed the street and felt a glance longer than normal, her heart raced, a cold sweat ran down her spine. In her jobs, she was treated with condescension, the new girl who was too quiet, too elusive. Once, in a restaurant where she worked cleaning at night, the shift manager, a burly man with a smile full of gold teeth, stopped her. "Lena," he said, his breath smelling of alcohol, "if you keep being so absent, so ghostly, you won't last here. Or do you have something to hide? Sometimes you seem like a fugitive to me, you know?" The comment, thrown out as a joke, pierced her like a dagger. Lena felt a knot in her throat, bile rising. Her hands trembled so much that the cleaning rag fell to the floor. The humiliation was so profound she could barely breathe. That day, when she got home, she looked in the mirror, her tearful eyes revealing the truth of her fears, and felt her dignity slipping away, like fine sand. She promised herself that one day, just one day, she would free herself from that shadow, from that constant threat that forced her to live with her soul on edge. The oppression was not just external, it was an internal yoke, the weight of an unresolved past that denied her peace. But what no one, not even she herself in her flight, fully remembered was that behind that facade of a timid, silent woman, Camila Valeriano possessed a gift that bordered on the prodigious, an exceptional photographic memory, an almost supernatural ability to observe, remember, and recreate every visual detail with astonishing precision. From a young age, she had been a brilliant artist. Her paintings were not mere copies, but recreations so vivid they captured the soul of what she saw. Her father, a modest art historian, had cultivated that skill, teaching her to see patterns, to detect anomalies, to break down the complexities of a scene or a face. This was her hidden treasure, a skill that her trauma had buried under layers of fear, but which, unconsciously, had helped her in her escape, allowing her to memorize routes, recognize faces, and anticipate dangers. She had used it to escape, to survive, but never consciously to confront her past. Hints of her talent emerged from time to time. In the few moments of solitude, Lena would doodle in a notebook, capturing with astonishing precision the details of a face on the subway, the texture of a wall, the play of light and shadow in an alley. Her drawings were so exact, so full of life, that even strangers who happened to see them were surprised. Once, in the cafeteria where she washed dishes, a local artist, seeing one of her sketches that had fallen from her pocket, picked it up and studied it with astonishment. "This is incredible," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the drawing. "The technique, the eye for composition. Are you an artist, girl?" Lena, her heart racing, only stammered a denial. "No, just a hobby." But the artist was not fooled. His eyes widened, his surprise palpable. "No, this is more than a hobby. This is a gift." Lena merely shrugged and walked away, trying to dispel the attention. But the artist's words resonated in her mind, an echo of the truth she had tried to bury. That ability, her eye for detail, for light and shadow, would be her most potent weapon in the battle ahead. A battle she didn't know she was about to fight. Lena's internal monologue was a constant whirlwind, a silent conversation with the ghost of her past. Every day is a flight, a disguise. How long can I stay hidden? Fear is a constant companion, a cold knot in my stomach that prevents me from feeling peace. I look at the people around me, their simple lives, their everyday worries, and I feel a searing envy. They don't know what it's like to sleep with one eye open, to feel the breath of the past on the back of your neck. Mom and Dad, are they okay? Do they know I'm alive? Or do they think the monster caught me? Guilt gnaws at me. But I couldn't stay. I couldn't let that man harm them anymore. I'm a coward, aren't I? A fugitive hiding in the shadows, while he remains free, powerful, untouchable. Sometimes the despair was so deep that she felt like screaming, running aimlessly until her lungs burned. But then, a flash of light. I am not just a victim. I am a survivor. And this gift, this ability to see details, to remember every shadow, every expression, is my shield. And perhaps someday, my sword. Even if it's just a hobby now, maybe it's the key. It's frustrating, exhausting to live with this dichotomy, this constant threat. But what if this flight, this constant vigilance, was actually the preparation, the training, for the moment when I can no longer flee? I can't. This unease gnaws at me. I must find a way to stop running, to face whatever awaits me. My life cannot continue to be a prison without bars, a wandering soul hiding in the darkness. I am tired of being a ghost, and if destiny brings me back to him, then so be it. But I will not be the same Camilla he shattered. I will be Lena, the one who sees, the one who remembers, the one who is no longer afraid to face the truth, no matter how painful. The vindication, if it comes, will not be for him, but for me, for my freedom. And then, perhaps, I can paint with light again, not just with shadow. The antagonist, the very personification of Lena's terror, was Armando Castillo, a man in his 50s, with a dark elegance and a smile that rarely reached his eyes, which, of an icy blue, seemed capable of seeing through one's soul. Castillo was not just a criminal. He was a silent predator, a mastermind behind a network of forged art and money laundering. His arrogance did not lie in ostentation, but in his absolute conviction of impunity, in the belief that he could manipulate and destroy lives at will. To him, people were pawns, and fear, his most effective tool. His power extended like a shadow through the circles of high society and the underworld. Castillo's behavior, though not always direct, was a constant reaffirmation of his cruelty and omnipresence. Lena had known him in her past life, when her father, an art historian, was deceived and then silenced by Castillo's network upon discovering his forgeries. Castillo did not kill with direct violence. He killed souls, silenced truths, and destroyed futures. His threats were not shouted, but whispered, wrapped in false courtesy. Once, when Lena's father began asking too many questions, Castillo appeared at his art gallery, not with thugs, but with a smile. "Mr. Valeriano," he had said softly, "I admire your perceptiveness, but sometimes curiosity can be a poison, especially when one has such a talented daughter, so beautiful. Be careful." The barely veiled threat had chilled Lena's blood, who watched from a distance. Her father's reaction was instant pallor, an uncontrollable tremor in his hands. Castillo needed nothing more. His cruelty lay in the fear he instilled, in the way he stripped people of their security, of their peace. Another example was how, after Lena's father's disappearance, Castillo managed to make the Valeriano family forgotten in the art world. Their contacts evaporated, their finances froze. He did not pursue them with physical violence, but with a social and economic annihilation that was just as devastating. Castillo's downfall, Lena thought, should be as visceral and public as his oppression had been silent and omnipresent. Lena's life, after escaping, was a precarious existence under the yoke of invisible injustice. She woke before dawn in her small apartment, where the cold seeped through the window cracks. Her routine was immutable. The shift at the flower shop in the food market, a place full of life and colors that contrasted with the darkness of her soul. Then, cleaning offices at dusk, where she got lost among empty cubicles. The monotony of her existence was a shield, a way to avoid being seen, to not stand out. But even in her anonymity, oppression seeped in. The derogatory comments were no longer about her origin, but about her silence, her distant air. Her co-workers called her the ghost, or the taciturn one, whispers that reached her and chilled her heart. Every time she heard a radio playing news about art or great magnates, her heart raced, fearing to hear Armando Castillo's name. Paranoia was a constant companion, an echo of her past that refused to die out. Once, at the flower shop, a customer complained that she hadn't put enough effort into a bouquet, calling her expressionless and almost non-existent. Lena felt the humiliation burn. Her hands trembled as she tried to redo the arrangement. Her throat closed. That small, seemingly insignificant slight was a constant reminder of her condition, of the forced invisibility that gnawed at her. The opulent environment she had known in her previous life, the world of art and galleries, contrasted brutally with the precariousness of her present. She remembered the brilliant halls where her father exhibited his works, the smell of fresh paint and varnish, the murmurs of admiration. Now, there was only the smell of dampness and cleaning products, the hum of machines, the silence of empty floors. That dichotomy was an open wound, a constant reminder of what she had lost, of the life that had been taken from her. But it was also a driving force, a reason to continue, to one day reclaim that part of herself that had been stolen. The injustice was in the air, in the expensive perfume of people who passed her by without seeing her, in the echo of their carefree laughter. It hurt her. It burned her. It constantly reminded her of her place. But that same injustice, that same opulence that excluded her, also fed her. This is not mine. Not yet, she thought. But its brilliance will guide me in the darkness of his corruption. The irony is that the more they try to humiliate me, the more they expose themselves. Their masks will fall, and I will be there to see their cardboard world crumble. The monotony of her existence under that oppression became fertile ground for the birth of an unbreakable resolve. The seed of change, the first indication that her past was not only haunting her, but had anchored itself in her present, did not arrive with a thunderclap, but with an image, a fleeting glimpse on the vast canvas of the city. It happened one afternoon as Lena walked through the busy streets, her gaze accustomed to meticulous observation, a habit developed by fear. She stopped in front of the window of one of the most prestigious and exclusive art galleries in the district. A world of luxury and refinement that was both familiar and alien to her. In the center of the exhibition, under a bright spotlight, stood out a piece of modern art, an abstract sculpture of polished metal and sharp angles. Her first reaction was one of fleeting admiration, her artistic eye recognizing the mastery. But then, her eyes fixated on a detail, a small engraving on the base of the sculpture, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. It was a signature. Not a common signature, but a stylized symbol, a capital C intertwined with an A, a distinctive mark that only she and a few experts would recognize. It was the personal signature of Armando Castillo, the man she had fled from. The impact was immediate and visceral. Her heart skipped a beat, a dry, painful thud that resonated in her ears. Her hands trembled so much that the small cloth bag she carried almost fell. "It can't be," she whispered, her voice barely a thread, her eyes fixed on the symbol. "It's impossible. He's in another city, in another country. This must be a copy, a coincidence. His art is only forgery, not creation." But her mind's logic refused to accept that explanation. The symbol was too exact, too personal. Her internal thoughts unleashed a whirlwind of panic and a growing understanding. "It's him. He's here. In this very city. Perhaps in this very district. How is this possible? How could he reach me even here, or did I never go far enough?" I feel a chill running down my spine, an icy terror. Mom and Dad, are they okay? Does he know I'm alive? Or is his presence here a macabre coincidence, a trap of destiny? Paranoia suffocates me. But if he's here, if his shadow has reached me, then this is not just a threat. It's a sign. The flight is over. This isn't a trick of the light. It's real as the terror that gnaws at my soul. Every evasion, every kilometer traveled, every sleepless night. Everything takes on a new and terrifying meaning. What if this symbol, this signature, is more than just a piece of art? What if it's a message, a provocation? I cannot live with this doubt, not now that his presence feels so palpable. My life cannot continue to be built on a lie, on such a monumental omission. The need for answers had become an unstoppable driving force, an urgency that outweighed any other consideration. The gallery air grew dense, charged with ancestral secrets. My hands, once trembling, now feel firm, driven by an imperative need to unearth the truth, however painful it may be. This is not just a resemblance, it's a sign, a call to the deepest part of my being. And if he's here, if the war has come to my door, then I must be the Camilla he thought he destroyed. The artist who sees, who remembers. The one who is no longer afraid to face the truth. Lena's transformation process, from a fleeting shadow to a resolute and astute woman, was an immersion in the depths of her own past and the darkness of Armando Castillo's present. This was the key segment for length, as every action, every thought, every detail had to be meticulously amplified. Her first step was a methodical investigation into Armando Castillo's presence in the city. Under the guise of seeking information for a non-existent art project on the influence of modern art in urban society, Lena began visiting art libraries, newspaper archives, and online databases. The atmosphere in the library was an oasis of calm, but her mind was a battlefield. She reviewed art publications, business news, society columns. Her fingers, once skilled with brushes, now patiently traced names and indexes. She searched for Armando Castillo and his associated companies, tracking his arrival in the city, his investments, his acquisitions. Frustration was a constant companion. Days of searching yielded nothing conclusive about his direct link to the gallery or the sculpture, only generic articles about an art magnate who moved between continents. Lena's internal monologue during those moments of fruitless searching was a constant struggle between hope and despair. Every article I read is a labyrinth. He is like an eel, elusive, leaving few direct traces. How can such a powerful man be so invisible, so ghostly? I realize that he is my dark reflection. The pressure overwhelms me. I feel the librarian's gaze, the curiosity in her eyes when I ask for old art newspapers. I must be more cunning. I cannot raise suspicion. Fear is a cold knot in my stomach. Am I wasting my time? What if this search only puts me in greater danger? But the pain of ignorance is greater than any possible disappointment. I have to keep going. This need to know is like a fever consuming me. The truth, however painful, is the only possible liberation. Every frustration is another brick in the wall of his secret, but also a step that brings me closer to unearthing it. My hands are dirty from the dust of these books, but my spirit is purified by this tireless search. I must find the connection, the thread that links his art, his finances, and my past. Lena decided to infiltrate. She managed to get a cleaning job at the very gallery where she had seen Castillo's sculpture. The smell of wax, cleaning products, and fine paint was now her daily routine. She moved like a shadow through the corridors, her eyes and mind, her photographic memory, absorbing every detail. She found strange patterns, nocturnal art deliveries, unmarked boxes that moved discreetly. One night, while cleaning the gallery manager's office, she found an open digital agenda. On the screen, a name, Octavio, and dates marked special delivery. The name Octavio chilled her heart. It was Armando Castillo's middle name, the one he used in his most intimate circles. The date was the previous week. This led her to an art warehouse on the outskirts, a hermetic and guarded place. The collection of evidence became a macabre dance of risk and reward. Lena, using her artistic ability, began to make detailed sketches of the art pieces she saw in the warehouse, pieces that her father would have recognized as forgeries. She discreetly photographed shipping documents, inventory records, and most importantly, she found a list of bank account numbers that did not match the gallery's public records. Her heart pounded 1,000 beats per hour, her breathing shallow. The risk was immense. If she were discovered, her life, her identity, everything would crumble. Her hands trembled as she photographed the documents with her mobile phone. Adrenaline surged through her veins. Lena's internal monologue became a whirlwind of emotions. It's bigger than I imagined. Not just art, but a large-scale network of forgeries and money laundering. The name Octavio confirms it. He has built an empire of lies, and he is involved. Rage burns in me. My father, he was right. He was murdered for this very truth. It's not just a deception. It's a crime, and I am in the middle of it. There's no turning back. I must continue. Every image, every number, every document is a piece of the puzzle. Truth has a price, and I am willing to pay it. Every extra hour, every cold coffee, every frustration will be worth it. It will be worth every tear shed in secret. His secret is not as safe as he believes, and truth is like water. It always finds a crack to emerge. Obstacles and setbacks were constant. One night, a security guard, a large and burly man, found her in a restricted area of the warehouse. Lena, with her heart in her throat, had to invent an elaborate story about a cleaning error and a lost item. The guard looked at her with suspicion, his eyes scrutinizing, but eventually let her go. Cold sweat ran down her back. On another occasion, the gallery manager, a young and ambitious woman, began asking her questions about her unusual interest in the archives. Lena had to feign ignorance, her face expressionless, while inside, frustration gnawed at her. She locked herself in her small studio, pounding paint tubes with contained fury, releasing the tension before returning to the cold logic of the investigation. But every step forward, no matter how tiny, propelled her onward. She had discovered that the warehouse was the center of a vast network of forgeries that sold masterpieces to unsuspecting collectors, and that Armando Castillo was the mastermind behind it all, using his facade as a respectable art magnate. The cruelty was not just economic, it was a betrayal of art itself. Sensory details were etched into her memory. The smell of fresh paint in the warehouse, the hum of computers processing illicit transactions, the contrast between the dirtiness of her work and the darkness of the truth she unearthed. Every element urged her to continue, weaving the web of truth. On this solitary and dangerous journey in search of justice, Lena found two unexpected souls who became the pillars of her resurgence. Professor Rios and Anya, a young prodigy hacker. Her encounter with Professor Rios, an octogenarian art historian, was a serendipity forged in the pursuit of truth. Professor Rios, a stooped man with a disheveled white beard and piercing blue eyes, had been a colleague and close friend of her father, a man who had tried to expose Armando Castillo's forgeries years ago, only to be silenced and discredited. He lived in a small apartment crammed with books and artworks, his reputation tarnished, his spirit wounded, but his mind still lucid. Lena contacted him under the guise of being an art student interested in his forgotten work. At first, Professor Rios was cautious, his voice heavy with bitterness from years of ostracism. "Young lady," he said, his voice hoarse, "the art world is darker than you think. There are men who trample truth for money and power. Lena, with her innate empathy, began to speak of her own father, of his love for art, and how her father had been a great admirer of Rios's work. Slowly, the professor's barrier of skepticism crumbled. When Lena, with extreme caution, began to describe the details of Castillo's forgeries, the way the master forger had mimicked the brushstrokes of old masters, Professor Rios's eyes lit up with their old spark. "Exactly," he exclaimed, striking his cane against the floor. "That is Armando Castillo's technique. He is responsible for the biggest art fraud of the century." Trust was forged in that shared revelation. Lena told him the truth about her identity, about her father, and about the injustice that had marked both of them. Professor Rios, moved to tears upon learning that his friend's legacy still lived on in his daughter, became her mentor. "Young Camilla," he said, reclaiming her real name, "art always seeks truth, and you are an artist. I will help you expose him, for your father, for the integrity of art." His motivation was the vindication of his own name and that of his friend. Professor Rios provided Lena with contacts in the art world, experts who could authenticate the forgeries, and taught her how to identify the secret watermarks Castillo left in his works. Their conversations were long and profound, filled with art history and strategies to unmask such a cunning criminal. The second ally, Anna, was a force of nature. A brilliant but troubled 22-year-old hacker working independently in the digital underworld. Lena found her through a contact of Professor Rios, someone who had recommended her as the only one capable of finding a needle in a digital haystack. Anna lived in a small, dark apartment, surrounded by computer screens and the constant hum of servers. At first, Anna was cynical and distrustful. Her abrasive personality and every man for himself attitude clashed with Lena's serenity. "And why should I help you, Mr. Ibiles Lena?" Anna asked, her eyes piercing. "I don't have time for romantic detective stories." But Lena, with her emotional intelligence, was not intimidated. She spoke of the injustice, of how Castillo had destroyed lives, of how her father, a good man, had been silenced. She showed her photographs of the forgeries, the digital traces that Anna could find. "It's not for me, Anna," Lena said, her voice firm. "It's for the truth, and because this man must be stopped." Anna, who also had her own reasons to resent corrupt power that abused the vulnerable, felt a spark of indignation. She had seen the ugly face of injustice in her own past. "Very well," Anna said, her lips forming a thin line. "I hate those who think they are above the law. Tell me what you need." Her help was invaluable. Anna, with her hacking skills, was able to track Castillo's illicit financial transactions, infiltrate his private servers, and unearth incriminating emails and fraudulent contracts. She found the names of the buyers of the forgeries, names of magnates and collectors, and proof of how Castillo had manipulated them to launder money through his artworks. Conversations with Anna were fast-paced, filled with technical jargon and a high-risk action plan. The collaboration between Camilla, Professor Rios, and Anna became an unstoppable machine for truth-seeking, an unlikely trio united by a deep sense of justice. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, and the magnitude of Armando Castillo's empire of forgeries and money laundering became palpable, the tension in Lena's world reached unbearable levels. Armando Castillo, with his network of informants and his nose for danger, began to feel an invisible pressure. He didn't know who was plotting his downfall, but he sensed that something was brewing in the shadows. His paranoia, though carefully disguised by his usual coldness, manifested in increasingly desperate actions. The first preliminary confrontation, an escalation of tension that pushed Lena to her limit, occurred during a high-profile art auction that Lena, along with Professor Rios, who now introduced her as his prodigy pupil, attended to observe Castillo's movements closely. Armando Castillo, radiant in a tailored suit, saw her. His blue eyes, icy as glass, settled on Lena. For an instant, a fraction of a second, a spark of recognition, or perhaps doubt, crossed his gaze, before his face regained its mask of indifference. He approached her, his smile a poisoned dagger. "My dear Miss Soto," Castillo said, his voice soft, almost a whisper that only the two of them could hear. "It is always a pleasure to see new faces in these circles. But sometimes, certain faces bring back memories. Memories of a past that some would prefer to leave buried. Curiosity can be dangerous, don't you think? Especially for those who have secrets to keep." His gaze lingered on Lena's eyes, as if trying to pierce her soul. The phrase "secrets to keep" was uttered with a chilling coldness. Lena felt a shiver run down her spine. Her hands trembled, but she held Castillo's gaze. Her heart pounded with brutal force, but her face remained impassive, a mask of forced serenity. "Mr. Castillo," Lena responded. Her voice, though a little tense, possessed an unusual firmness. "We all have memories, and some, like art, must be exposed to the light, don't you think?" Lena's reply, her audacity in showing no fear, unsettled Castillo, who looked at her with barely contained fury before retreating, his smile now a grimace. Inside, Lena's internal monologue was a mix of terror and fierce determination. "He recognized me, or at least he suspects. I felt it in his gaze. The fear is real, a cold knot in my stomach that steals my breath. But the adrenaline also gives me brutal clarity. He won't stop me. His desperation is my strength. This is not just a threat. It's a recognition that I have power over him. What I am about to reveal will destroy him, and he senses it. The war has begun." The second confrontation was even more personal and dangerous. One night, as Lena returned to her small apartment, she found the lock forced. Inside, chaos. Her few personal belongings strewn across the floor, the wooden easel overturned, and her sketches, her precious drawings, torn and scattered around the room. And on the broken easel, a small envelope. Inside, a photograph of her father, his smiling face with a kitchen knife plunged into the center, and a hastily written note. "Those who revive the past, bury it. Forever." The scene left her frozen. The message was undeniable. "We know who you are, Camilla. We know what you're looking for. And we can hurt you and yours if you don't stop." Lena felt tears welling up, but she refused to give in. Rage ignited in her chest, a furious flame that dispelled the fear. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from pure indignation. "They've crossed the line. I won't forget my father. They think violence will stop me. They're wrong." Her internal monologue became a silent declaration of war. "It's no longer just a search for the truth. It's a fight for my father's memory, for justice for the innocents he has deceived. They have revealed their true nature, their boundless cruelty. His desperation is palpable, and his tactic cowardly. I must be very, very close. The truth is about to explode, and when it does, no luxury will save him from the fall. The moment has arrived." Armando Castillo and his circle grew tenser with each passing day. Their paranoia became evident to anyone observing them closely. Their smiles were more forced, their movements jerkier, and he was often seen speaking quietly on the phone, a worried expression on his face. The tension was so dense that Lena could almost taste it in the air, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and the cold certainty that justice was about to be served. Lena, with the help of Professor Rios and Anna, had orchestrated the moment with cold precision. The vindication would not be hers alone, but for all who had been silenced by Castillo's shadow. And so, my dear friend, we arrive at the day, the point of no return, the pulsating heart of this story of redemption and truth. The most exclusive art charity gala of the year, organized at the prestigious Museum of Contemporary Art. The place was a temple of glass and marble, with illuminated masterpieces shining under calculated light. The guests, the city's elite, the most influential collectors, the most severe critics, mingled in a hum of polite murmurs, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the gentle murmur of live classical music. Armando Castillo was the guest of honor for the evening, his imposing figure in an impeccable tuxedo, his smile perfect, his aura of power and respectability radiating confidence. He moved among the guests with the arrogance of a king, his grave voice resonating with comments about the intrinsic value of art and the passion for beauty. Everything was orchestrated to be a night of triumph, the crowning of Armando Castillo as an irreproachable patron. But among the crowd, a figure moved with silent determination. It was Camila Valeriano, now with the name she reclaimed, not Lena Soto. She wore a simple but elegant dress, a deep blue color that highlighted the recovered sparkle in her eyes. Her hair, once pulled back, now fell freely over her shoulders, framing a serene face with a quiet strength. Beside her, Professor Rios, with his wisdom and his cane, and on the periphery, Anna, mingling among the waiters with a small electronic device hidden in her hand. The scene was perfect, a backdrop of opulence for the explosion of truth. Just as Armando Castillo was about to deliver his acceptance speech, to receive an honorary award for his contribution to art, an unusual sound began to filter through the hall's loudspeakers. It wasn't music. It was a hum, a crackle, and then a voice. Armando Castillo's voice, but distorted, robotic, as if from a nightmare. A tense silence fell over the hall. Smiles froze on the faces of the guests. Castillo, microphone in hand, looked around with a mixture of surprise and confusion. His jaw slightly dropped. The distorted voice continued, this time reading numbers, dates, names of fictional companies. Then, an image appeared on the giant screens, used to display promotional videos for the museum. It was not a promotional video. It was a document, a contract. Armando Castillo's face appeared on the screen, superimposed with a stamp that read, "False authentication." The murmurs of the guests turned into a clamor of astonishment and disorientation. What's happening? Is this part of the show? Who is that man on the screen? Armando Castillo tried to regain control, his face paling. Security, cut the transmission. This is sabotage. His voice, though he tried to make it authoritative, had an almost imperceptible tremor. But no one moved. Anna, from her strategic position, had intercepted the network and was projecting the information she had collected. Camila Valeriano, who had been standing discreetly near the stage, took a step forward, her gaze fixed on Castillo, a gaze he had not known in years. Her voice, clear and resonant, without a trace of the shyness or submission that had marked her, echoed through the hall. It's not sabotage, Mr. Castillo. It's the truth, and I have come to reveal it. Armando Castillo, seeing Camila, paled even further, a greenish tinge to his skin. His eyes widened excessively. Incredulity, recognition, and pure terror etched themselves into them. His jaw relaxed. Camila, no, It's impossible, he stammered, his voice barely a thread. The audience looked at each other, confused. Camilla. Who was Camilla? But Professor Rios, his voice firm, stepped forward. Mr. Castillo, Rios said, his voice resonating with authority. This is Camilla Valeriano, the daughter of the man you destroyed, the man you deceived and silenced to conceal your vast empire of forgeries and money laundering. On the screens, images began to appear. Photographs of the art forgeries that Castillo had sold as masterpieces. Documents showing money transfers to offshore accounts. Emails revealing the details of his deceptions, his conspiracies to ruin those who stood in his way. Anna's network was relentless. Every piece of evidence was irrefutable. The secret watermarks that Professor Rios had taught Camilla to identify were shown. Small details in the forgeries that proved their spurious origin. The name Armando Castillo appeared again and again, directly linked to every fraudulent transaction, to every forgery. The collectors present, the critics, the curators, watched the screens with horror and growing indignation. Armando Castillo, his face distorted, tried to stammer an explanation, a desperate attempt to blame his subordinates, to deny the undeniable. It's a setup, a conspiracy. She's crazy. But his words drowned in his own desperation. Cold sweat ran down his forehead, his hands trembling uncontrollably. Arrogance had vanished, replaced by panic. The power dynamic reversed in an instant. The eyes of the guests, who once admired Castillo, now looked at him with a mixture of disgust and fury. He was no longer the magnate, he was the criminal. Camilla, with the complete report in her hands, approached the microphone. Her voice, though calm, was imbued with undeniable authority. All the evidence has been verified by independent experts, by Professor Rios, and a complete copy of this report, including my father's records, has been sent to the relevant authorities and Interpol. The last sentence was a coup de grace. Castillo stumbled, his knees giving way. His face became a mask of defeat. The luxury of the gala was only the harbinger of his downfall. The hall filled with controlled chaos. Shouts, murmurs of indignation, the sound of chairs moving. Security agents, who had received the alert from Interpol, entered the room, their faces serious. They went directly to Armando Castillo. He was handcuffed right there, in front of everyone present, his imposing figure reduced to that of a pathetic criminal. His steps were uncertain, his gaze lost. The public humiliation was palpable, a more devastating punishment for him than any prison cell. Camilla, with the report still in her hands, observed the scene. A strange sense of emptiness mixed with deep satisfaction. There was no overflowing jubilation, only the cold certainty that justice had prevailed. The silence that followed was the echo of an era ending, and another just beginning. The shadow had been dispelled by the light of truth. Armando Castillo's fall was a brutal spectacle, exposed to the world with a rawness rarely seen. News of the scandal, of how a respected art patron had orchestrated an empire of forgeries and money laundering, and how he had silenced those who discovered him, spread like wildfire across all media, all. Newspaper headlines and news reports spoke of nothing else, with phrases like "art in the service of fraud," "Castillo's empire crumbles." The legal implications were relentless. Interpol and local authorities, with the meticulously compiled dossier by Camilla, Professor Rios, and Anna, acted swiftly. Armando Castillo and his accomplices, some of them gallery directors and high-level accountants, were arrested days after the gala, their faces gaunt and unmade up in the police photographs published across all media. The contrast with their lives of opulence was visceral, almost obscene. The trial was a media circus, a feast for the tabloids. Sordid details of Castillo's life were revealed. His megalomania, his disregard for human lives, his mansions in the art capitals of the world, his art collections, now revealed to be largely fake, all funded by the money from his scams. The society that once revered him for his power and wealth now looked upon him with palpable disgust. His friends from the artistic and social elite, those who laughed at the paranoids who questioned Castillo, distanced themselves with shameful speed, fearing that the stain of scandal would cling to their own names. His support networks vanished like smoke. Contracts were rescinded, his accounts were frozen, his properties were seized one by one. The sentence was severe. Armando Castillo was sentenced to a long prison term for fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice, and was hit with an exorbitant fine that left him bankrupt. Images of him, handcuffed, his face haggard and his eyes filled with terror and despair, being transported to a maximum security prison, were disseminated everywhere. His new reality was hell. A small, cold cell, bland food, the company of common criminals, the end of everything he knew. The world that had elevated him now spat him out. His name became synonymous with betrayal and greed. The fall was total, painful, and for many, deeply satisfying. As Castillo's empire of forgeries crumbled, Camila Valeriano's rise was meteoric. The story of her escape, her resilience, and her triumph became a global phenomenon, a symbol of integrity and courage. With Professor Rios' support, Camila not only recovered her father's heritage, but invested it in a new project. The Valeriano Gallery, an ethical and transparent art space dedicated to promoting emerging artists and rigorously authenticating works. Her intelligence and eye for art transformed her into a respected and admired figure in the art world, not for her surname, but for her talent and honesty. Her new professional status was that of CEO of her own artistic foundation and the Valeriano Gallery. Camila's life changed overnight. From her modest apartment, she moved to a bright and spacious art studio with views of the city, where she could finally paint again, not with shadow, but with light. Her father's memory was honored, not only by the gallery, but by the Artist's Eye Foundation, which Camila established to provide scholarships to talented young people lacking resources and to investigate and denounce fraud in the art world. Her grandmother, who had lived in uncertainty for years, was found and was able to live her last days in peace, surrounded by the love and security that Camila could give her. Her tears of joy at seeing her granddaughter triumph were the sweetest reward. But beyond material wealth, the most significant aspect was her emotional healing. The burden of flight had dissipated, replaced by a quiet confidence and an inner peace she had never known before. She had found not only justice, but her own identity. Camila did not forget where she came from. She used her new position not only to rebuild the art world on ethical and transparent foundations, but also to create a legacy of help. Professor Rios became the head curator of the Valeriano Gallery, and Ana, the hacker, was hired as the head of cybersecurity for the foundation, using her skills to protect art from new frauds. Their lives, once marginalized, now flourished under Camila's guidance. The significant reunions were the sweetest proof of her triumph. At one of her charity galas, Camila met the shift manager from that restaurant where she used to clean, the man who had called her a fugitive. He looked at her with astonishment, his face pale. "Miss Valeriano," he stammered. "I didn't recognize you. My apologies for my behavior in the past." Camila looked at him with a genuine smile devoid of resentment. "We all deserve a second chance, sir. And we all deserve to be seen for who we truly are." Camilla's kindness was a stronger blow than any reproach. The artist who had recognized her talent in the cafeteria was now a close friend and frequent collaborator of the Valeriano Gallery, marveling at the turn of fate. The presence of the young woman who had fled her past, now a woman of power and compassion, was a beacon of change, a reminder that truth always prevails. Camilla's new life was a work of art in itself, a symphony of vibrant colors and perfect harmonies. Her new position, her studio, her inner peace were testimony that true wealth resides in the soul and integrity. And so, my dear friend, this is the story of Camilla Valeriano, a woman who teaches us that a person's true worth is never in the brilliance of what they possess, nor in the size of their fortune, but in the unbreakable strength of their spirit, in the depth of their courage, and in the purity of their integrity. It reminds us that the shadows of the past, however dark they may be, cannot hide the light of truth forever. Dignity is not bought. It is earned. Justice, though it may seem to delay, always finds its way. And resilience, that spark that refuses to be extinguished in the darkness of adversity, is the torch that illuminates the path to the sweetest and most resplendent vindication. Camilla's story is an enduring message for all of us. Never underestimate someone who seems to be fleeing, because it is possible that they are gathering the strength to return and dismantle the world of lies that once oppressed them. Today, years after that transformative day, the Valeriano Gallery has not only become a global benchmark for ethics and profitability in art, but Camilla Valeriano is a living legend who inspires millions with her story of resilience and her unshakable faith in the power of truth and kindness. Her legacy is a beacon of hope, an eternal reminder that justice, compassion, and the true worth of the human being, in the end, always prevail.